Hello everyone! In this week's video, I'm drawing 3 of my viewers' original characters. A couple weeks ago, in this video, I announced that I was accepting OC submissions, and you all sent me a bunch of different characters. Because there are so many characters to choose from, I'm going to have a random number wheel pick who I draw. I did this in the last OC video, and many of you seemed to like it, so I brought it back. But this time I won't be using a wheel to pick which social media I choose from. I'll choose one entry from Twitter, one from Instagram, and one from email. But for Instagram, I will be using a wheel to pick if I choose from hashtag or direct messages, since both options are possible. So let's see what it picks. Okay, it picked hashtag, so let's see which number it chooses. Also, I counted the submissions until I started to get to ones that were a few months old. So number 24 was created by Milk Straws. The character's name is Kitsune. She is 14 or 15 years old. Kitsune is popular, confident, and extremely stubborn. She wants to help everyone and makes people around her feel comfortable with her. She likes cakes, sweets, and onigiri or rice balls. So let's start drawing Kitsune. Right now I'm doing my super rough sketch to flesh out my concept. So honestly, when Kitsune was picked, I had no idea what kind of picture I wanted to draw for her. For some reason, nothing was really coming to me and I had to think a lot. This is kind of why I like using the wheel to pick characters at random. When I pick the characters myself, a lot of times I won't choose them if I can't easily think of an illustration idea. But in this case, it forces me to try to think of ideas that are maybe a little different, or maybe that I don't easily think of. So yeah, picking the characters with the wheel kind of forces me to think outside the box. I'm not sure why, but the detail that she likes onigiri kept staying in my brain, so I decided to draw her eating them. Maybe she's at some kind of food place and she ordered some. Also, I hope it's okay, I drew Kitsune looking a bit younger. The description says she's 14 or 15, so I'm drawing her how I draw my 14 or 15-year-olds in my style. In Milk Draw's style, she looks a bit older. So yeah, I hope it's okay she looks a bit younger in my style. Now I'm sketching the hair and it was giving me issues. It's because she had a good amount of stuff going on around the top of her head. Her bangs swoop upwards, she has a headband-like thing, and also a small side ponytail. And when you add all that together, you get a slightly confused Becca. Hopefully the way I drew it makes sense and looks okay. I edited it even more later on. Next up is the torso and the arms. The torso went smoothly and didn't give me issues. Plus she's wearing a baggy sweater and those are really in my comfort zone. Oh, also in the picture she is wearing what looks like a backpack. I decided to not include that since she is sitting and eating. I figured she wouldn't be wearing it at this time. One part I was hoping to turn out okay was the hands that are holding the rice balls. One hand has the palm down and the other has the palm up. I had found a reference picture for this to help me out a bit, and I'm really glad I did because it helped a lot for drawing them, and I feel like they turned out okay and they looked like they were holding the food, so that's good. I wanted to have there be a plate with more rice balls on it, but I didn't feel like drawing the plate, so I dragged in a 3D model plate and I'll draw over it later. I find it slightly humorous because I'm like, yeah, let's draw a character with a kind of complicated hand pose. I would love to do that. But for drawing a plate, it's like, no, that's too much work. But it's just a plate. But I'd rather use a 3D model for it and not have to deal with it. Also, I think I'm going to have there be a window behind her so that we can have some pretty lighting. Next is the cleanup sketch, or line art. My intention was to do a cleanup sketch, but I kind of ended up with line art that's slightly sketchy in some areas. It's like my sketch still felt a little messy, and I wanted to do a cleanup of the face and the hands more, but everything else felt okay, so I kind of just did line art for those parts. So yeah, we got a sketchy line art combo. I don't have much to say for this part, so that's why we're kind of speeding through it. And I'll also be adding in the base colors for it. So for the lighting, my idea was to have her be backlit by the window. Maybe it's like evening time or dinner time, so the light's kind of warm, like sunset lighting. So I added a pinkish multiply layer and added in the light that's hitting her from behind. That makes the light sound kind of violent. It's hitting her from behind. I added the different colors to the hair and now I'm adding some cell shading. For the cell shading of the pink areas, I used a dark magenta, and for the more blue colors, I used a dark blue. For shading the torso, I tried to leave the edges with no shading, so that it looks like the light is hitting those areas, like the sleeves and some parts of the hands. I was trying to keep in mind that she is being backlit, but because the windows extend past her, the light is able to come around. I also added another layer of multiply to the face because the light wouldn't be hitting it, so I felt like it needed to be a bit darker, but I didn't want it to be too dark. I'm not sure what else to talk about. I don't have much to say for the rest of the shading until we get a little further in the footage. So how has your summer been? If it's summer for you. Mine has been good. The weather has been really hot for a while, but it's starting to get a bit cooler again, which I kind of like. It's nice to be able to go outside and not feel like you're melting. My family and I actually keep going swimming in our pool. We have an above ground pool set up and it has a heater, so it's really fun to go in there. And we tend to swim at night, so the air is kind of cool, so it feels nice. But we do have to be really quiet so we don't wake the neighbors. The younger kids can be kind of noisy, especially if they start fighting because one splashed the other one. Also, we watched fireworks for the 4th of July, and that was a lot of fun. We were able to watch them from our house. Some of my other siblings went down to where the fireworks were, but I stayed behind and watched them from home. But Jack stayed up late to watch the fireworks, but not long after they started, he was so tired that he went inside and fell asleep on the couch. He was so tired. He was like, okay, cool, I saw them. Now I'm gonna go to sleep. But they were really pretty. So for shading the rice balls, I applied gradients to them, and then to make them look like they have a kind of rice detail or texture, I used different colors and drew little oval shapes on them. I used a mixture of lighter and darker colors. This part was actually really fun. I liked making the rice have the kind of rice texture to it, but I wanted to keep it kind of simple and cartoony and not like overly detailed. Now we have the eyes. I did my usual shading process for these. I added shading to the eyes, added the lighter colors that are set to add glow to the top and bottom, and I also added the little circular highlights. I did try doing that thing where I add some of the eye color to the eyelashes. I did that in this video where I drew your gacha characters, but in this one it ended up being really subtle. Lastly, we have the finishing details to bring everything together. I added a bit more lighting and some light rays. I also added a wood texture to the table to make it more interesting and less flat. I also decided to shade the hair a bit more. It was feeling a little flat, so I added some highlights to give it some more shape. I added some lighter highlights all throughout the hair and a band of highlight that goes across the head. I find that the band of highlight always helps convey that the head is kind of round, and the lighter highlights just kind of helped break up the strands a little bit. Oh, I almost forgot, I also added some little rice pieces on her face because I thought it might be kind of cute. When my brother walked by and saw this picture, he said it looked very anime, and I agreed. It's kind of funny because I always draw in this kind of style, but for some reason this one felt more anime for some reason. And so here's my finished picture of Kitsune. I hope you like it, Milk Straws, and thank you so much for letting me draw your character. So next we'll pick from the email submissions. This one always gets the most submissions. So let's see what the wheel chooses. Entry 613 was created by Mika-chan. Her character's name is Ruth, and her superhero name is Mitigate. She is 22 years old. Ruth is on a small superhero team called the Visionaries. She doesn't take part in a lot of the fighting because she has healing powers and a flying ability. Ruth is very shy and has a nervous habit of braiding her hair. So let's start drawing Ruth. So recently I've been in the mood to paint some landscapes. I've been kind of painting some simple ones in my sketchbook, but I've wanted to do a more rendered piece with a landscape. My idea is to have Ruth be flying in the air, and she is in an area with a lot of pine trees and mountains. I was thinking maybe she was flying and came across this pretty area, and she's taking a moment to look at it. I'm drawing Ruth in a kind of standard floating pose. Her arms are out and one leg is coming up. But as I was drawing the pose, I was thinking back to those pose studies that I did in this video, and how I noticed that I often don't push poses. So that's something I was trying to do here. Like, her arm is back, but what if I moved it back even more? Or her leg is up, but what if I made it go up even more? Her back is bent, what if I bent it even more? Things kind of like that. I think it resulted in a pose that looks more lively, or at least I hope it does. Now I'm just getting a very rough idea of how I want the background to work, and I'm kind of doing a color test and trying things out. I was using a reference for the background and it was this picture. I wasn't following the reference exactly, mostly just using it as inspiration for my picture and to help me better grasp the concept I wanted. Before fully moving on to the background, I wanted to clean up my sketch of Ruth. It's kind of funny saying Ruth because I have a sister named Ruth, so it feels like I'm talking about her. But yeah, I'm just cleaning the sketch and also adding the details of her superhero outfit. Also, I hope it's okay I drew her hood in a downward position. I wanted us to be able to see her face, and I thought it'd be cool if her hair flowed around. So yeah, I put the hood down. I did spend a decent amount of time drawing Ruth, but honestly I felt like I spent more time on the background in this case. To start out, I'm using a brush that makes rough pine tree shapes, and I'm mostly just using these to get an idea of how I want to place the pine trees and their kind of general shapes. This was actually super helpful and made it way easier to decide what I wanted to do exactly. I have the pine trees are in the foreground, and I'm going to add another layer in the midground that's kind of behind Ruth. And behind those I'll have another layer that is kind of all blended together. I feel like that sounds a bit confusing, but it'll make sense once I start shading them all and adding color. They won't just be a big blob of black. I'm starting with the foreground trees since they will be the most important and have the most detail. Honestly, when I started, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just kind of going and hoping for the best. I'm painting over the rough shapes and making them look more how I want and refining the shape more. For the trees, I was using these textured paintbrushes that I got from an online class that I talked about in this video. I don't remember the name at the moment, but I'll put it up on screen. I kept switching between the brushes to try to find a texture that I wanted or that worked well for the trees. And after a lot of trial and error, I eventually found one I felt like worked okay. It had the texture I kind of wanted. It was when I was painting this tree that I started to get an idea of what I was trying to do. So for painting the trees, I basically make some rows that have darker colors. This kind of gets the idea that there's rows of branches and there's kind of shadows under the branches. Then I go in with a lighter color to highlight parts that stick out. I decided to have the light be coming from the right, so I'm applying more yellow highlights to the right of the trees and more bluey highlights to the left of the trees. When shading things in a kind of abstract way like this, I sort of defocus my eyes, or I try to stay zoomed out and I kind of look at the big picture instead of the tiny details. I feel like doing this helps me get the bigger colors and values in place, and also helps me to be more painty with it instead of worrying about all the little details, which is what I often do. For the trees in the far background, I didn't add any detail. Instead, I make them a light color to make them feel far away and apply some yellow lighting to them to give the idea that the sunlight is on them. Now for the mountains. The one mountain is closer and we can still see some of the details on it. The one in my reference picture was covered in pine trees, so I used a brush that makes tiny pine trees and applied them all over the mountain. It took me a few tries to apply them in a way that looked okay. I wanted them to flow nicely and not weirdly overlap each other. For the mountains that are super far away, I just used the lasso tool to make the rough shape, filled it in with purple color, and applied some gradients to make it look a little bit more interesting and not super flat. But it is mostly just kind of a silhouette. Now for the sky, I was trying to paint in some clouds, and I was kind of trying to do it in a different way. I wanted the clouds to look like they were receding in the distance, but for some reason they were just looking a bit odd. My reference had a clear sky with no clouds, so I probably should have found different references for the clouds, which I did kind of try to do. Sometimes when I want to get an idea of cloud placement, I'll use the different cloud backgrounds in the asset library and drag them around to help get an idea of what I want. But when I placed this one, it was perfect and I felt like it was what I wanted. So I just kept it. Why fix what isn't broke? It worked really well. Also, I randomly decided to add this little water tower thing. I don't know, I just thought it'd be kind of cute. I also added some tiny birdies. I thought these little details would add a bit of interest to this side of the picture since there wasn't a ton going on over here. Okay, so now that I have the part I was nervous for done, I can work on the part that I'm more comfortable with, being the character. Shading the character actually went by really quickly, mostly because she is so tiny, there is only so much detail I can go into, so this makes things go a lot faster. I did really enjoy adding the yellow highlights. I mostly used the thin gouache brush for this, and kind of painted in the highlights. And also thinking about how the light would cast a shadow on the different parts of the body was a lot of fun. I wanted to make sure Ruth stood out and that she was still the star of the picture, So I applied some blue on the front side of her to help her pop out a bit more from the background. And here's my picture of Ruth. I had so much fun getting to work on a picture with more of a background. Like I said, it's something I've been really wanting to do recently. Thank you so much for letting me draw your character, Mika-chan. She's really cute and I love her outfit. So lastly, I'll be choosing from the Twitter entries. Twitter always gets the least amount of entries, so people who submit on here are more likely to get picked. But let's see what the wheel decides. It picked number 1, and I was not expecting that. The person who was the first entry in the recent tab on Twitter was Frachalia. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. But their character's name is Shiki, and he is 25 to 27 years old in human years. He's a fear-eating monster who lived in the ruins with his parents as a child. There he encountered Ari. He is now his close friend. So the thing that stuck out to me about this character is the fact that he eats fear. I was kind of curious about that, like what does fear taste like? And what would it look like to eat it? So I'm kind of drawing my idea of what I think it would look like to eat fear. And I apologize in advance to the creator if this wasn't what you had in mind at all. I'm just kind of having fun with the idea and drawing inspiration from it. So my idea is that he has his hand up by his mouth and maybe he's holding a bunch of fear and it's kind of flowing out from around his fingers. I do really like Shiki's design. His eyes are really cool and I was really looking forward to coloring his eyes and the lighter eyelashes. I also really liked his fluffy hair. One part I was a bit nervous about was the hand and including the gaps in between the fingers. A lot of times when I draw hands, the fingers kind of all go right next to each other and there's not much for gaps, but I wanted the misty fear stuff to flow out from his hand, so I wanted to include space for it to flow out from. Also, I purposely made his fingers kind of long and skinny. I thought maybe by doing this I could make the picture look a little bit more off-putting or a little more creepy. Not that people with long fingers are creepy, but I don't know. But I didn't want to draw his hands cute and chubby because that's often considered cute, so I did the opposite of that. I tried to make them a bit more angular and I included the tendons and different things like that. Once I drew the hand, I played around with the placement. At first it was kind of partially covering his nose, but if I did that, I would need to change the finger placement so that it goes around his nose. And I didn't want to do that, so I moved the hand down a little bit so that it's under his nose. After drawing the hand, I sketched the shoulders and hair. I also ended up doing a second cleanup sketch. My first sketch wasn't that messy, but I wanted to clean things up a bit more and make things more neat to make it a bit easier for coloring and all that stuff. I do have a new line art brush I've been using, and I used it in last week's video, but I didn't use it at all in this video. I don't know, for some reason I just wasn't feeling up to doing line art. Plus it does save a bit of time. Like if I had done line art for this picture, it probably would have taken another 30 minutes. Which isn't too bad, I just didn't feel like doing line art, I guess. But I do really like the new brush I've been using for line art. I've played around with the settings of it, and it's slowly becoming more to my liking, and I'm now pretty comfortable with it, so that's good. For the lighting in this picture, I thought it would have a dramatic vibe if I had him be lit from above. So the only things that are getting majorly hit by light are the top of his head, his nose, and a bit of the top of his hand. The rest is going to be in shadow, but I'm not going to make it get super dark because I still want us to be able to see him. But under his brow bone, I did make it get pretty dark because the brow bone would be casting a shadow. Plus, I thought it would make his eyes really stand out because of the contrast in values. Also, one part of the shading that's kind of a small detail, but I really like it, is I added a shadow to the back of his hand to help it feel like it's on a different plane than his fingers and the arm. And I do feel like it really helped convey the idea that it's bending kind of towards us, or that his wrist is bent. To make the hair look like it's being lit from above, I applied a ring of shadow, and to make it interesting, I made it slightly different hues, like a little warmer by the light and cooler at the bottom. Then to add details, I used the blending tool to blend the shading into the strands. I had a lot of fun rendering this lighting setup, and I feel like it has the feeling I was going for. Something a little bit off-putting, but not creepy, just kind of mysterious. When I get to the eyes in a moment, I noticed he had a white pupil in his original design. And I hope it's okay I didn't make it totally white. I feel like that would have called a little too much attention in this case. but I did make it a lighter color. At first it was a light muted purple, but then I changed my line art color and it turned teal, and I kind of liked it, so I kept it. So yeah, I didn't make his pupils pure white, but I did make them a lighter color. Lastly, I drew the fear. In my original concept, the fear was kind of flowing all over the place, but I thought that made it seem like he wasn't doing a very good job at containing it. So I decided to make it just flow out a little bit instead, so it looks a little bit more contained. And so here's the finished result. I had so much fun drawing Shiki. His design is really neat and the lighting was a ton of fun. All of these pictures were actually really fun to work on, and I feel like I got to try a lot of different things. Thank you so much to everyone that submitted characters, and I hope the creators like these pictures. Oh, also, I want to say thank you so much for 700,000 subscribers. I plan to do a subscriber special next week, so I hope you will tune in for that. And before we end, I want to thank my super awesome YouTube members and patrons for their support. It means a ton to me. And thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next week in my next video. Bye!